Hi everybody, this is John from Envision Robotics. Thanks for tuning in to our tutorial today. Envision Robotics is a STEM studio based in Toronto, Ontario, and we offer a variety of in-person and virtual STEM classes for kids that are 5 to 14 years of age. We believe that 3D modeling, 3D design skills are really important for kids to learn, so we've created a Getting Started with Tinkercad tutorial. This is really an introductory tutorial just to familiarize kids with how to start creating with Tinkercad. It's not in-depth. We do have a lot of more in-depth tutorials that are available on our YouTube site, so feel free to visit them and watch them. We're going to break up our tutorial today into 3 sections. The first section will be creating an account. Section number 2 will just be becoming a little bit more familiar with the Tinkercad layout and core functionality. And then third, we have a number of practice exercises. So you want to follow along step by step. The practice exercises that we're going to run through today are number 1, resizing and learning to raise and lower objects on your platform. Number 2, learning how to rotate an object. Number 3, changing an object's colors. Number 4, aligning and grouping objects. And number 5, creating a hole in an object. Number 6, working with text. And lastly, creating a backpack tag, which is a little bit more involved step by step and utilizes a lot of the skills that we've just covered in the previous exercises. So stay tuned, and we look forward to working with you on these exercises. Thank you. Okay, so let's get started with creating an account with Tinkercad. Tinkercad, very popular, very well-known 3D design, 3D modeling platform. It's wonderful for kids to learn with. And so what you're going to want to do to create an account is open up a web browser and go to www.tinkercad.com. You can put that in the address, and that will take you to this site here. And this is the homepage that you'll find. And a couple of areas to pay attention to. If you have an account, obviously you can sign in over on the top right over here. But if you're looking to create an account, and an account is required actually to use Tinkercad, you're going to want to click on Join Now. Now, Tinkercad runs on a browser. There's no software to download, so it's really easy to get going with this application. What you're going to want to do is focus in on the create a personal account. Don't worry about creating an educator account or anything like that. Click on Create a Personal Account. I'll do that now. And you're presented with a couple of options. One is to sign up with an email. This is typically what I recommend, but if you prefer to sign up with your Google or Apple account, you can click on these options here. If I click on sign up with an email, you're going to be asked to put in some details about the country you're in and your date of birth. And I'm just going to leave it there. You can walk through the steps on your own. It's pretty self-explanatory, and it only takes just a couple of minutes to create an account. So once you've created an account, you can just come over here to the top right and click sign in, and it'll ask you to enter your email, username, and you're off to the races. So there you go. That's section 1, creating an account with Tinkercad. Okay, so we're back. So we're going to dive into section 2. So after you've logged into your Tinkercad account, you're going to see a view that's very similar to this. Mine is a little different here in that I have a lot more content. I've been working with Tinkercad for quite a while, so my designs show up here, and also on the left-hand side I have a number of project folders, and I've also got, because we teach Tinkercad, I've got some classes set up over here. So yours will look very, very similar. So this is our main page, and after you log in, you can use this page to access previous designs that you've created. You can also use this to, say, delete something that you've been working with and you actually don't need anymore. So you click over on the project. There's a little gear that shows up. I'll show you again. You can change properties. You can duplicate. You can move it to a project folder if you want. I'm just going to delete this one for a moment. I don't need it anymore, and I've brought, I get this message, delete my project. I can confirm that, and once I click delete, it's gone. So These are refreshed on a regular basis, and you'll see little images, little icons there representing your designs. Mine are not showing up at the moment because I have a lot going on my screen, but trust me, they're there. If you want to search for some ideas or inspiration of what others have created, over on the top right here, there's a little search command. You can click on that and you can type in things, anything. You can type in a car, a house, or get some ideas of things that others have created. You can also change some account details, including your profile picture here on the top right. So that's really just a little bit about the main page. Maybe one other area I'll draw your attention to. If you've got, you start creating a lot of different projects, you can create some folders for yourself so that you can organize. This is, you click down here, create a project, and you can see I've got a number of these that are project folders. And whenever I've completed a number of designs, I just actually click on the gear here, and I just move them into a project to help organize my things. So that's the screen after we've logged in, and in a few minutes I'm going to take you in to create a new design, so stay tuned for that. Okay, so now let's get into the main part of Tinkercad where we start doing our 3D modeling. So what I'm going to want to do is create a new design. So I click on the icon here, create new design. And that will take me into the main platform. Just loading here. Okay, so here we are. So this is the main modeling area for our Tinkercad. And just to walk you through a little bit of the layout, again, we're still in section 2. So obviously the big area in front of me here is my work plane. And so one of the things I like students to learn how to do is just to move their platform around. So if you're using a mouse or if you're using a trackpad, just click on it and use your index finger to slide it around. Works really well if you're using a trackpad like on a laptop. You can see here that there's a navigation cube. So as I move my platform around, so does the navigation cube. And this navigation cube is handy. So if I want to look at different perspectives, I can just click on, there's like little grayed out arrows, or I can click on the actual cube itself to move that platform around. If I've kind of got myself discombobulated and I'm not sure where I am in my view, there's a handy little icon here. It's called the home view, the little house. I click on that and it's just like that. It zips me back to the main view that we like to work in with Tinkercad. A few other navigation tools here. We've got a zoom, and I'll just drag something out here for a moment so you can see how that works. I've got a plus and a minus, which allow me to zoom in and out of my platform. So here I'm going to click on the plus, and you can see that I'm zooming in. I'm going to click on the minus to zoom out. And again, if I want to just come back to the default view, I click on my little house, and there I go. Okay. A few other things here. If I want to make a copy of my object, so I've just loaded a sphere onto my platform, I can do a couple of things. I tend to use shortcuts like Control-C for copy, Control-V for paste. Works the same way in a lot of, probably all the Microsoft applications. That's very handy. I can also do a duplicate with Control-D, and I can also use my keyboard to delete an object. Tinkercad, though, also has a few other commands on the menu bar that we can use that do the same thing. So you'll see up here on the top left, there's the copy for Control-C. I'm going to click that now, and it didn't create quite a copy yet because what I need to do is click on the icon next to it for paste, and there I go. Okay, so that is the Control-C, but there's also an icon here for copy. Control-V, there's an icon here for pasting, and if I actually want to make a duplicate, I can use Control-D, or I can click on this icon here and it makes a duplicate. Now, it looks like when I click on that, nothing happened. But in reality, there is a duplicate. It just creates a copy, an exact copy right on my existing object. And if I use my arrow keys, I can just move that object over. So that's very handy when we're having to create duplicate copies and we want it to be in almost the exact position, except maybe just moved over slightly. If I want to delete an object, as I mentioned, you can use the delete function on your keyboard. I just did that now. Or you can come over here to the delete icon, click delete, and there we go, the object disappears. If I want to undo something that I just did, maybe I made a mistake or I wanted to just kind of keep something that I accidentally deleted, then I click on my undo, and there we go. It'll undo that previous command. Okay. Over on the right side here, I'll just take you over to the right. Tinkercad has a wonderful library of lots of different shapes. You can see that there's boxes and cylinders and spheres and roof and all of that. And I can scroll down and access more. There's even some text that we can add. We're going to work with text a little bit later. There's also a drop down over here. If I click on that, there's lots of other little libraries that I can access to find different shapes to work with my 3D designs. I like to work on the basic shapes. I find that there is enough there that we can use these to create custom, my own custom shapes. So that is the library. If I actually want to just make more room on my platform for a moment, I can click on this hide the shape panel. It hides it just like that. I can bring it back by clicking on that little arrow right here. Okay. Now, a couple of other things, and some of these are really important because we tend to use them all the time. And this is group and ungroup and align. And we're going to do a few exercises in our practice exercises to demonstrate that. But if I want to actually just show you for the moment where these are, the way that I grab, and if I'm going to group, I need actually more than one object, or if I'm going to align, I need more than one object. So what I do is I click on my platform with my cursor and then just drag my cursor upwards. It can also be downwards. Doesn't matter what direction, but what I'm doing is I'm forming a red outline around the objects that I want to grab. And once I've grabbed them, you can see that I can click on one of them and move them both around. What happens when I've got more than one object grabbed, these icons show up. They were previously grayed out. And you'll see here, this one is group. This one here is align. And so we're going to cover that in the exercises in a moment, but I just wanted to show you where they are. One or two other things before we move to our practice exercises. So I've got an object here. It's solid, but if I want to actually turn that object into what we call a hole, I click on that over here, and it turns it into a transparent object. And I can use that object, and we'll demonstrate that a little bit later, to kind of carve out a component, carve out a shape of solid objects, and that's very handy to use. Okay, and so another area I want you to just take a look at, and we'll do this in the practice exercise a little bit later, but really learn how to change colors. I tend to like to work in light colors. I just find it a little bit easier on the eyes. And I also find it a little bit easier to see the arrows and kind of my little handles for sizing my object as well. So we can change the color of our objects. There's a lovely little palette here that I can choose from. There's greens and blues and all of that stuff. So that's how I change the colors. And like I said, we'll cover that a little bit later. If you're into 3D printing and you have a 3D printer at home, you can click on Export up at the top here, and you can download your print as an STL file, and you can then convert that into a GX file for 3D printing. If you've got a model, 3D model that you want to import, you can do that through the import function. So that's basically the layout of Tinkercad, some of the core functionality. And so we're going to move into our practice exercises in a moment, and you can follow step by step. Okay, so welcome to section 3, where we're going to work on a number of practice exercises. You can follow along step by step. We hope you're enjoying the tutorial so far, and we hope that by the end of our exercises here that you feel a lot more comfortable designing and creating and all of that with Tinkercad. Okay, so let's jump right into our exercises, and just a couple of things as we get going. You'll notice up at the top here there is a crazy name. In Tinkercad, what they do is they assign a crazy name to every design that you come up with. And that's easy enough for us to edit. So the way to change the name of that is to click on it, and then I'm just going to call this tutorial, and I've already got tutorial number 1 in here. So just click on that, hit enter, and that will save the name. And I find it's really important to save the name of the projects that we're working on, because as you can see from all the designs that I have, if I don't have a name, and I've got all these crazy names, it's really difficult to figure out the projects. There is a little icon at times that shows me what I've been working on, but sometimes I may be working on designs that look the same. So it just saves a little bit of time. So make sure to name your project, okay? So the first exercise that we're going to work with is just learning how to size, resize, raise and lower objects. So what I'm going to do is I like to start with a box. So I'm going to bring my box out onto the platform. And as I said, I like to work in light colors. So I'm just going to pick a light color, and it just makes it easier, obviously, for everybody to see as well. I'm just going to zoom in here so you can see this a little easier on your screen. So you'll notice that when you bring an object onto the screen, Tinkercad has a default size. So if I click on one of these little pull tabs here, you'll see that the standard size of most of the objects is 20 millimeters by 20 millimeters. And if I click on this one here, it's also 20 millimeters in size. Okay, so I can size this object in a few different ways. I can grab one of the pull tabs here, and I can just drag it, and you can see that it's allowing me to resize this object in a more freeform manner. And so if I want to try and get it to, say, 40 by 40, I'll just move it over here a little bit for you. If I want to, say, move it to 40 by 40, I can try to get pretty close, and I can usually get there. I've got 39 on one, 40 on another. There, I've sized it so it's 40 by 40 there. And then what I can do is come up and pick on one of the other tabs here, click that, and then just size it upwards. And I want to make it 40 by 40 by 40. It's a cube. There we go. Okay, so there we go. So it's 40 by 40 by 40. So I've maintained the proportions for my object. I'm just going to go delete that for a moment. Let me go grab it to resize. Bring this over, and I like to work in a light color. Okay. Another way for us to resize our object, and let's say I want to maintain the proportions. So I can hold down my Shift key, and I can grab one of the tabs here, and I can just pull, drag my cursor, and you'll see that it's maintaining the size, the proportions. So good. Okay, so I've done that. And lastly, if I want to another way to resize our object is I can actually just do that by clicking on any of the values that come up. So let's see, this one here is 19. If I want to make that 30, I just click on that to make it 30. If I want to click on this one and make it 20. So lots of different ways, lots of different options for resizing your object. Now, my object is sitting nicely on my platform. You can take a look underneath there. Okay, so it's sitting nicely on my platform. Let's say I want to place it underneath or over top, another object. I'm just going to make another object here. What I can do then is I can click on my object, and you'll see that there's a little cone. And when I bring my cursor over there, it turns red. So I can just use that to raise and to lower my object on my platform. Now, sometimes you got to be very careful. You'll see that I'm sliding it underneath my platform, and I can tell by the value here, and it's turning to a negative value. When I bring it upwards and it's sitting nice and flat, my value here turns to 0. If it's above the platform, there's 1 millimeter above, 2 millimeters above, 3 millimeters above. And what I can do is I can then just use my arrow keys to slide that over if I'm trying to align or if I'm trying to place objects on top of one another. Okay, so that's how we resize objects. That's how we raise and lower objects. And so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to practice exercise number 2, where we rotate an object. Okay, so let's get started with learning how to rotate an object. So I've just cleared off the other object on my screen, and so when I click on my cube here, my box, you'll see that there are a number of arrows that curved arrows that show up, which allow me to rotate my object in different directions. So I'm just going to move it over here. So if I click on my object, you'll see that I can rotate kind of the object a number of different ways. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So, okay, so first thing you want to do is click on your object, and you'll see that it brings up a series of dashed lines, and that will help you align to what angle you want to rotate. So one of the easiest ways to learn how to rotate is you click on one of those curved arrows, and then you'll see that there is a little box that shows up for me to put in the angle that I want to rotate my object at. So I can put in 45 degrees, and you'll see that it rotates my object 45 degrees. I'm just going to hit undo for a moment and show you how I can rotate my object in the opposite direction. I can use minus 45, and you'll see that it rotates the object in the opposite direction. I can also rotate my object so it's flipping it back. So what I like to do is shift my platform a little bit so I can see this. Just taking a second for my computer to catch up. There we go, and I can do the same thing. Click on 45 here. Come on here. There we go, 45. And you'll see that I'm flipping my object backwards. So you're going to want to try to rotate your object in a number of different ways. Now, there's a couple of other ways for me to rotate my object. When I click on my curved arrow, and I'll just do that at the front here, and I hold my cursor down, I can also rotate my object by moving my cursor left, or I'm going to move it right here. Now, a couple of positions for our cursor. If my cursor is positioned inside the dashed lines, I move it at a 22.5 degree angle every time I shift my cursor around. And it's just catching up there. There we go. Okay. Now, if I actually want to rotate my object with a finer degree of precision, what I can do is click on that curved arrow and then move my cursor outside of the dashed lines, and you can see that I can rotate really just 1 degree at a time. And this is very helpful if you're trying to rotate an object with a high degree of precision, and it actually tends to be a little bit smoother. So I like to use that way of rotating. Okay, good. So hopefully that's enough there to get you started with learning how to rotate an object. Practice exercise number 3, changing an object's colors. Now, we did a little bit of that earlier when we covered off on some of the core functionality, but I'll just show you again really quickly. Let's say I've got an object here. As I said, I like to work in a light color, but now I want to change my object to, say, a tan color. I click on what's the solid color here, which brings up my palette. And there I go. I can change it to tan. I can change it to like a mauve color. I can change it to a, let me see here, a yellow. If I have a couple of different objects on my screen, and let's say I am, and we'll cover this a little bit later when we do grouping, but I'll show you now if I just happen to group these two objects here. What happens when you group objects, it takes one of the dominant colors. In this case, it took the yellow, the color yellow, but what I can do is I can click on multicolor down here, and it will revert back to the object's original colors. And that's helpful if you're designing something like we do lots of minions, or we do some Minecraft stuff. It just allows you to maintain the initial part colors. So that's how you change an object's color. We're going to go to exercise number 4 in a moment, aligning and grouping objects. So practice changing the colors for a moment. So this is practice exercise number 4, learning how to align and group objects. So I'm going to bring over here a box. Just going to make it a little bit different size here so you can see it. And as I said, I like to work in a light color. That's a tip for everybody. I'm going to grab a sphere. Let me just go and grab a sphere for the moment, okay? So for the moment, I'm just going to place my sphere over here on the platform. But let's say I actually want to align my sphere right over top of my kind of flattened square here, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these two objects by clicking somewhere on my platform and using my index finger and dragging my cursor across these two objects. I can tell that they're both selected when I'm able to move them by clicking on one of them and moving. Now, as I said, I want to do the align first. So I'm going to click on my align tool, which is up here in the menu bar. And if you hover your cursor over top, you'll see that, that the word align comes up, and L is the shortcut for that. But I like to use the icon up here. Okay, so when I click on align, it allows me to align in a number of different ways. I can click on this middle tab here, and that will actually align so that it's aligning the centers. If I want to align the other center, I can do that as well. You can see that I've now got my objects nicely aligned. I'm just going, and if I want to say align in a couple of different ways, I can align another center here, so I can actually have this square kind of positioned nicely around my sphere. Look at that, that's kind of cool, right? Created an interesting little shape here. So that's how we use the align tool. It takes a little bit of practice. We use align and we use group so often because we're obviously lots of fun things, and so I urge you to try the align function to get proficient with it. Now the next step here is if I want to group. And my group and ungroup is right near the align. So if I click on group, and I did that earlier when we were showing the colors, what will happen is we'll group these two objects that I have selected, okay? And now if I click on any one of these and I try to move it around on the platform, of course they're grouped and they're going to move together. So the group and ungroup work in very similar ways. I'm going to just click on this object for a minute. And actually, before I click ungroup, I want to show you too that once I group my objects, I can continue to size them in different ways, right? I can use the freeform size, or if I want to size them maintaining the same proportions, I can just click on Shift and do that. So make sure you try that. Lastly, as I said, let's just ungroup these, click on the ungroup function, and then I can easily pull these apart. And there I go. So that is the group and ungroup functions as well as the align. So make sure to practice those. The next step is for us to go and create a hole in an object, and I'll be right back. Okay, so let's now create a hole in an object, right? And again, when you're 3D modeling, 3D design, and you're creating a lot of your own creations, using one object to create a hole or to carve out a shape from another object is something you do all the time. I'm actually, for the moment, going to get rid of this particular sphere, and I'm going to go and grab a cylinder. Now, there's two ways for me to do this. One is to go and grab a solid object and turn that into a hole, and I can do that like that. Or Tinkercad also has a couple of shapes that are actually starting points. One is a box and the other is a cylinder, so I can just drag that onto my screen and it performs the same thing. Okay, so I'm just going to stick with the original one that I started with, which was I grabbed a solid, brought it onto the screen, and turned it into a hole. Now I'm going to use my align function. Now the first thing I want to do is just put this first object flat on the platform, my flattened square. Okay, and so let's say I want to align these two first. I go over to my align function, and I'm going to click on the center tabs here and make sure I'm aligned. So it's going to put this nice little hole perfectly in the center of my flattened square. Now I'm going to use my group function because one is a hole and one is a solid. It's going to allow me to create a hole right in the center of that particular object, just like that. Pretty straightforward. Now I'm going to undo this for the moment. And I'm going to show you that I can also move this cylinder around and create a hole in this area. And I can, maybe I'll move it up to the corner here. And I'll just carve off, I'll make a copy of this, carve off some of the corners, just like that. And let me see what other objects we have over here. Let's say I want to create like a tube here, but I don't want it to be, I want it to be a hole. So I'm going to make that a little bit smaller, and I'm going to resize this here, shift this over here a little bit. Okay. Now I'm not going to align anything for the moment, but I just want to show you how to create a hole in an object, or in this case, we've got a hole, and then we also have multiple carve-outs. I just select all the objects here. I click Group, and behold, I've got this kind of cool little shape here where I've got a couple of carve-outs over here, and I have a kind of this little ring in the center of my my object. Okay, I didn't align things, but I could have done that to make it make sure it's perfect. Okay, but there we go. So that's how we go and create a hole, as well as creating a few carve-outs of my object. Come back here in a second, and we're going to work with text. So give that a try. Okay, so now let's get a little experience working with text. So you'll see that in the basic shape area, there is a shape that's called text, and I'm also able to click on the drop down here, and I can access a few more text and number shapes. But I tend to like to just work with the one that's part of the basic shapes. And when I drag this out onto my platform, and I mentioned earlier that the default size for a lot of the objects is 20 by 20 by 20. In the case of text, it's closer to 74. Yeah, there we are, 74. It's almost 20, and it's about 10 high. So it's rather large for most of the designs, most of the modeling that we do. So you're going to want to resize that appropriately, and a couple of things to work with. And I'm just going to actually, like I said, change the color to something a little bit easier to see. So a couple of things. The word text, usually nobody wants that as the text on their model. So the way to change that is to click on your text object here, and then click on the word text. And I'm just going to put hello and delete the word text there. And there we go. So I've changed what that text now says. I have the option of clicking on a few different designs that are available, fonts that are available in text. I'm going to go back to the first one here. There we go. A few other options here. I can change the size. Now I can change the size here as well. Or what I can do is I can click on over this area here, and I can just use this slider here and get my text down to the size that I'm working on. We're going to be working with text in a moment or two when we start working on our backpack tag. But I just want to show you a few things here. There we go. Now I'm going to make this a little bigger for a second. I can also use my bevel and segments to just make the text appear a little bit softer in design. So I'm just going to slide this down over here and work with my bevel a little bit. And you can see that, at least on the top here, it's got a nice rounded shape. So if I'm printing, say, text that I want to maybe put my name on my desk or something like that, I might use the bevel and the segments to just kind of create a little softer, a little nicer design to my text than just kind of a straight edge. So that's pretty handy. There we go. Right, so you're going to want to make sure to practice that a little bit. Just going to slide this down here. You can see we can actually make some really nice looking text that way. Prints off really well on a 3D printer if you're fortunate to have that available. Just while I'm here, if you want to take this and this hello here and turn it into a hole, and perhaps use that on another object to, I'm just going to grab another object here. Where are we here? Just going to do it real quick. So this is something you can do, right? Make this a boom, just like that. Bring this down here. So let's say I want to put this text on top here and then use that as a carve out, but it's still too big. What I can do is I can click on the Shift key and I can just slide my cursor by grabbing one of these tabs, and I can move it over here. And let's say I want the word hello right in the center, and I'm going to use my align tool. Boom, boom, just like that. And of course, if I group them, there we go. I should have the word hello. And if I had access to a 3D printer, which we do at our studio here, I could print that out and it could look quite nice. Now, those of you that have done a lot of 3D printing know that when I print this out, these objects are floating, so that's not going to print very nice. This is going to fall out of my 3D print. But what I can do, if that's the case, is I can undo that, click on the word hello, raise it up a little bit. Just want to put it into the platform a little bit and grab these two objects again, click group, and it shows up here. What happened here? There, maybe it wasn't far enough down. There we go. There we go. This here, actually I'm going to move it up a little bit just so it's easier to see. Grab these two again, group them. We've got a little thinner layer there. There, it didn't go all the way through, but we can do that. Pull this up a little bit. We can continue to resize. Actually, let me make this one a little bit larger. So this is the one thing about doing 3D printing, 3D modeling, is that often you'll do a couple of steps to see how it works out. If you don't like what you see, there, we'll just put this here. There, that'll be a little better for us. Group these two again to make sure we get the effect that we want. Good, there we go. Okay, so a couple of steps, but we finally got it. Okay, so now the last activity for the last practice exercise for this tutorial is creating a backpack tag. We do a ton of these at our studio for PA days and camps and all of that stuff. We give them out as little thank yous when kids attend our camp. We also do this as an exercise in our Introduction to Tinkercad instructed tutorial as well. We just think it's a good exercise that incorporates a lot of the functions, a lot of the steps, a lot of the skills that you're learning in this tutorial. So I'm going to start out with a let's do a cylinder today in terms of a round backpack tag. So I'm going to make this a light color. So I suggest you follow step by step, and if you need to pause this, please do so. I'll go a little bit slower to give you just an opportunity to pause so that you can keep pace here. So I've dragged out a cylinder onto my platform. I'm just going to resize this. I'm going to make it a little larger, and I want it to be in a proportionate. So click on my Shift key, grab one of the corners, and for the moment, I'm going to make it, let's see, 40. Actually, I'll make it 50, and it'll be a little larger on your screen. We don't normally make them this large, probably 30 to 35, 36 millimeters is a good size, but because we're doing a tutorial, it'll be a little easier for everybody to see. So I've now got this gigantic cylinder. What I want to do is make this about 4 millimeters in height. So I can either size it this way, or I can click on this area here, and I'm going to make it 4 millimeters. That'll be a nice thickness. Sometimes we use 3 at the studio. Again, we don't need it to be too thick. So I've got the initial size of my disc. What I want to do is I want to make a copy, because I'm going to create a backpack tag with a little ridge around the edge. So I Control C, Control V. You can do that as well. And I want to turn this second one into a hole. So I click on that here to turn this into a hole. Now I'm just going to confirm I didn't change anything but the dimensions that I have. And so what I want is a little ridge all the way around my my solid object here. So this one's 50. And so what I want to do is have a ridge about 1.5 millimeters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, because I know I need 1.5 over here and 1.5 over here, I know that's going to be 3. So what I'm going to do, and this is 50, so I'm going to make this one 47 by 47. Just going to change these here, and I'm just going to enter the values into my little areas here, just a little easier to size it that way. Now what I like to do is to also make this hole a little bit larger, because it just makes it easier for me to see when I'm dropping it into my my solid object. I'm just going to bring it over here by hand. You can see that, you know, I can get pretty close trying to align these two, but that's why we have our align functions. I just grab these two objects and I go over to my align function, click on my align, and I'm just going to align them here and here just like that. Now, if I was to group these two, I'll show you what's going to happen. It's not what we want, but I'll show you. It's going to create a little ring. So if you were looking to make a ring, there you go. You can create a ring pretty simple. Now, I'm just going to undo. As I said, that's not what we want, but just to show you how to do that. Next thing I want to do is I want to grab this little cone and I want to raise it up off the platform, and I want to have the thickness of the base of our backpack tag to be about 1 millimeter, maybe 1.5. 2 might be a little bit too thick. If I can't size it using the cone, I'm just going to come over here and click on 1.5, and you'll see it drops it down. So this is telling me that my hole is 1.5 millimeters off the platform. And so I know, because my solid object here is flat on the platform, that my the inner base is going to be 1.5. I'm going to now create a copy. This is a little practice that I encourage kids to use at the studio, is to make a copy as they go along. It just sometimes saves a few steps. I'll group that, and there we go. Okay, so now we have this, and also shows the steps as you go through this, right? So if you're learning how to do this, this is a good way to kind of keep track of what you're doing. Okay, so now I have this object here. It's got a nice little ridge, evenly spaced all around. Next thing I want to do is I want to add a little tab, a little area that I can go and add a metal ring if I have that, and certainly if I'm 3D printing this off. I know that my object here is 4 in height, so I'm just going to quickly resize this to 4. You can follow along and do that. I'm going to turn this one, and I'll just turn it another color so you can see what I'm doing here for a moment. Now, I'm going to make this, I'm going to freeform it. I don't actually have to make it perfect shape here. I'm going to have it a little bit like that. I'm going to bring it over here, okay? And for the moment, I'm just going to see if that will look okay. I'll look at my object here from a different angle. Now, in a moment, I'm going to actually group this with the main part of my backpack tag, but for a moment, I need to have a little circle hole. So I'm just going to check the dimensions here, 14 by 12. I think probably a good size for this would be 5 millimeters. You can always look at a ruler and just make sure it's going to be large enough for your metal ring if you have one available. I'm just going to put it in the center here. And when you're doing things like 3D design, and especially if you're going to 3D print things, you want to make sure that you have enough material around holes in that so they don't break easily. And we do a lot of backpack tags, and if there's not enough material, these things break off quite easily, and obviously kids lose them, and so we don't want that to happen. So I'm just going to grab these two, I'm going to align them just like that, and I will group them. And there I go. I can put a nice little hole in the center. If you find that maybe that hole is too small and the ring won't fit, you can undo and you can resize this as you need to. So I'm just going to show you how to do that. Let's make it 7 here, and I'm going to also make it 7. So again, when you do 3D design, just test things, see how they work, see how you like them. Boom, just like that. I've got them nicely aligned. I'll group them. Very good. Okay. Next thing I want to do is I want to group these two. And I want to have them aligned. Now, I don't want to have them aligned. If I align them like this, that's not going to look very good, and that's not going to be a very functional backpack tag. So for the moment, what I'm going to do is I'm only going to align on this axis here. So I want it to be perfectly aligned this way, and I want to take this object here, and I'm just going to use my arrow keys and position it to a place that I think will look pretty cool. Okay, I like that. Use my cursor to grab them, select them there. Very good. I'm going to group them. Now, because it really won't matter if I'm 3D printing this if I have maintained kind of the colors that I had initially, but just to show you what that looks like, I can do that. If I want to have kind of a, like I said, I'm looking for aesthetics and I want to show the different colors, I can turn it to be multicolor. So the last step here now is for us to go and find our text. Oop, zoomed right past it there. Where is there? There we go. I click on my text here. There we go. Bring it onto my platform. I'm just going to replace this text here with my name here, John. Very good. Obviously, it's way too big for my backpack tag, so I can just size it in proportion. Just grab one of the corners, hold my Shift key down, find the size that I like. We're almost done our tutorial here. Okay, now, if I'm going to flip it like this, you'll see that I don't want my text to be higher than my backpack tag. So what I'm going to do here is click on my text. And I know my backpack tag is 4 millimeters high, so I'm going to click on this to make it 4. And I'm going to I want to center it so that it is centered this way, but I don't want it to be centered this way, and I'll show you why. Because we have this handle, it's centering to the whole object, and that'll look too funny, right? So this next step, what I need to do is I need to go and click on my name, and I'm just going to use my arrow keys to center that. Now, I could have actually added my, after I created my disk here, I could have added my name and used that, have everything centered at that point. But I tend to like these steps here. I just think it's a little bit easier for kids to understand how to add the little tab at the top to for their middle ring. There we go. Okay, last step here to group these. Click group, and there we go. So I've got the backpack tag. If I have access to a 3D printer, I can click on my object. Now, what's important about Tinkercad, if you're exporting, if I just export here, I can click on export. It's going to export everything on my platform. If there's only one object on my platform I want to export, because often I'll have many designs on my platform, I just highlight and select that object, click export, and click on STL, and that will allow me to export that as an STL file to somewhere on my drive, which I can then use a slicer to import and prepare my file for 3D printing. So look, we hope you've enjoyed our Getting Started with Tinkercad tutorial. We're so glad to be able to bring this to everybody. We hope that kids and even adults out there develop a wide variety of 3D printing skills. As I mentioned, 3D modeling skills and of course 3D printing as well. We put a few other more in-depth tutorials on our YouTube site. So if you're looking to continue to expand your skills, we hope that you utilize those. And we hope that you've enjoyed this. And if you have, like, comment, and subscribe. So thank you, everybody.